Welcome back to the Thinking Crypto Podcast, your home for cryptocurrency news and interviews. If you are new here, please hit that subscribe button as well as the thumbs up button and leave a comment below. If you're listening on a podcast platform such as Spotify, Apple, or Google, please leave a 5-star rating and review. It supports the podcast and it doesn't cost you anything. Well, my friends, Bitcoin is pumping despite all the bank collapses and shutdowns. Bitcoin right now is sitting comfortably above $24,000. It's up between 10 to 11% from a 24-hour perspective. Some of the alts are following and they're up. Ethereum is back over $1,600. So what's happening here, guys? In the face of bank collapses and shutdowns and people going on bank runs and all these things, Bitcoin is moving. And if we look at the 4-hour chart here, we see some nice green candles. On the weekly chart, we see the retracement looking like it's still on track, right? Which we've been looking at for months since last year, that Bitcoin could retrace to the 40, 50,000 range, then roll over. So it looks like things are on track, but I'm cautiously optimistic because we got a lot of pain out there with these banks. We have a very different macroeconomic situation, right? Inflation, the Fed's been raising rates and so forth. So why is Bitcoin and the stock market moving? I think the markets are starting to price in that the Fed, given this banking situation, is going to have to pivot. Like, here's the narrative. Here's the situation for them to do it. And that is, hey, look, we know inflation's a problem. We're not able to get it down to 2% right now, but we have to fix this issue with the banking crisis that we're dealing with. And you had President Biden go on TV 9 a.m. Eastern this morning talking about he's going to do everything he can to fix this and blah, 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 and yada, yada, right? The political talk. But again, the narrative is there for them to pause rate hikes, even cut rates, and eventually start QE. Now, there's been some bailouts, so we don't know where that money is coming from. I think they're printing the money, honestly. They can do that anytime, right? I think we've all seen the Fed guys talk on 60 Minutes and CNN and whatever shows that they just press a button and it's in the computer, right? They can print money at a click of a button, my friends. That's what we're dealing with here. So I think the markets are looking ahead saying, oh, okay, we think we know what's going to happen here. QE is coming back, especially with the bailouts happening. And here's something to just give you some laughs. We always inverse Jim Cramer, right? Whatever he says, you do the opposite. Well, he just urged people on TV to sell their Bitcoin. So, we do the inverse. That means bullish times are ahead. So maybe Bitcoin continues its rally here to the retracement, but once again, not guaranteed. However, the big other story here, my friends, is that we're seeing crypto getting blamed for the banking collapse. And we've talked about it on the past two podcasts. Crypto, of course, had a big part with Silvergate. And many should know that Silvergate chose to shut down. Now, crypto wasn't the only reason Silvergate was having problems. Once again, interest rates, bonds, and so forth. These banks are all struggling. You look at their stock values across the board. You look at their books. It's not looking good. So we had some narratives put out by different people trying to say, oh, you see, this is a crypto-related situation. But Barney Frank, yes, many of you may remember that name. He was a congressman. He was part of the financial committee at one point, the House Financial Services Committee, and this was during the 2008 collapse. He was also the co-sponsor of the Dodd-Frank Act, which was put into place to help address the banking issues that took place in 2008. Well, he was interviewed by CNBC, and let me give you the context here. Signature Bank board member Barney Frank says the bank closure was political. Here's a quote. I think part of what happened was that regulators wanted to send a very strong anti-crypto message. We became the poster boy because there was no insolvency based on the fundamentals. So he's clearly saying this was an attack on the bank just because they were pro-crypto. Silvergate was, of course, pro-crypto. So was Silicon Valley Bank. Now, not just crypto, right? They were supplying financial services to a lot of the tech industry. But Barney went off script here, exposing the likes of Elizabeth Warren and Gary Gensler and so forth. Operation Choke Point 2.0 is a real thing, my friends. And I think Barney Frank here, he has no reason to lie. And some may say, well, wait a minute, Barney sits on the board. But we got some other folks validating this information, like Nick Carter saying that he's spoken to other sources who said the same thing that Barney's saying. So Nick said, "Dear God, Barney Frank openly admits that Signature was arbitrarily shuttered despite no insolvency because regulators want to kill off the last major pro-crypto bank. Colossal scandal." He says he heard this independently from other sources as well. "I suspected as much last night, but confirmed today. Signature was executed last night, not due to any runs, but as a political scalp intended to be veiled by the fog of war. Apparently, even the FDIC was surprised when it was dropped into their hands. The claimed justification was Signature's Signet product, which was perceived to be systematic." Nick says here, "My conclusion is that politicians like Elizabeth Warren, together with regulatory bodies, fragile crypto banks and encourage runs against them, then use withdrawals as a pretext to close them down. What was meant to be a surgical operation because a massive banking became a massive banking crisis." So once again, we've talked about Elizabeth Warren is sending letters, tweets, essentially starting and contributing to the bank runs, and then using those bank runs as situations to say, "Oh, you see, you got to shut this bank down," and then clearly going on the other side to the public and saying, "See, crypto caused the collapse," right? They're going to blame everything on crypto. It's crazy. Here, Nick Carter addresses Barney Frank. He says, "Because many are saying Frank isn't impartial, some more evidence. Number one, Signature asset portfolio was nowhere near as troubled as Silicon Valley Bank." He provided some evidence here. He said sell side felt Signature was sound yesterday. The FDIC was reportedly surprised by the decision Sunday night. So all out attack on crypto, my friends. That's what this is. Operation Choke Point 2.0. So you're going to have some talking heads running around saying crypto was the cause of this, but it was not. Now, what's interesting is that the likes of Elizabeth Warren and these folks who are starting these bank runs and putting the pressure, we've heard rumors they're working with short sellers, right? And we know that guys like George Soros were shorting Signature Bank and Silvergate Bank, and other short sellers I've heard about as well, but I can't tell you the names just because I don't want to give up my sources. But I've spoken to some people in DC, and they're saying there's other short sellers working with politicians. That's crazy when you think about it, right? And it should be illegal, honestly. But that's the legal bribery that our system has in place, which I'm not a big fan of. But that's a whole other story for another day. So, this is pretty painful, guys. You got these regulators going after these banks, and there could be a trickle-down effect and contagion that I don't think they expected, and that is this is going to go beyond any crypto-friendly banks. It could it certainly hurt other regional banks. So we'll see what happens in the coming days and weeks. And here we have a former FDIC chair. Her name is Sheila Bair. She was speaking to Liz Clayman on Fox Business, and she said what the Fed and FDIC did to save Silicon Valley Bank and the Signature Bank is a bailout, she called it. And Muse we put backstops in place to prevent that. So once again, the Fed bailing out companies here, and we'll see what else they continue to do. Ryan Selkis weighed in. He said Silvergate is still solvent despite an unprecedented 90-day, $12 billion liquidation sparked by corrupt sitting senator. Want to guess her name? Begins with an E. Her first name begins with an E. Her last name begins with a W. Who coordinated a bank run with short sellers. Signature was healthy. NYDFS went rogue in shutting them down and surprised even the FDIC. It's targeted. So I think people are starting to see here. And once again, Barney Frank confirmed that. Pretty crazy stuff. Here's an example of how they're trying to paint crypto as the issue. Here's a report from CoinDesk. The recent collapses of crypto-focused banks have only underscored the caution of the group of 20, G20, on crypto assets. A highly placed G20 source told CoinDesk. So, see, they're trying to say this and the bank runs and all these things was started by crypto. It was not. Were some of these banks affected by the hits that took place to crypto last year? Of course, right? No one would deny that. But once again, interest rates, their investments in bonds and so forth were failing. And I think that, one thing's good though. Biden, when he came out and spoke this morning, he didn't say anything about crypto. So that was good. I think at least him and some of the other folks, I think Janet Yellen as well, they didn't actually say anything about crypto, but you have these talking heads and these articles and certain people in the media who have that agenda, like your Elizabeth Warren and so forth, probably Gary Gensler as well. They will go out there and use that as a talking point, even though it's not the whole truth, right, guys? Here, John Deaton weighed in on the Signature Bank Barney Frank situation. He said, as each day passes, Judge Torres' decision in the Ripple case becomes more significant. If she wholeheartedly adopts the SEC's theory that all transactions of XRP, including XRP traded in the secondary market, are securities, it will provide Gensler both cover and momentum. So certainly, right, and especially the likes of Ripple trying to disrupt banks, and how they move money, and that is Swift. It gives Gary a lot of momentum here, as John said, and a lot of cover. Circle, we all know, we talked about it in the past two podcasts, the USDC stablecoin depegged. Well, it has has pegged again, and that doesn't mean it won't depeg tomorrow, right? Just depending on what's happening. But they have a new banking partner to calm the markets. Cross River Bank is taking over Circle's commercial banking partner. So obviously they had funds at Silicon Valley Bank, about $3.3 billion. And the good thing is their reserves were spread throughout different banks, but it obviously puts them in a tough situation. So it looks like they're trying to build out their banking partners, have more stronger partners here. So that's good. But I don't think we're out of the woods yet. Once again, it could be very volatile, even for stable coins like USDC over the next few weeks and months. Now, crypto.com, I want to highlight here, they said they have no exposure to Silvergate or Silicon Valley Bank or Signature Bank. Other exchanges have come out and said the same thing, but we know crypto.com is one of the largest out there, and they have a huge brand. So I think it's important to highlight that they're saying this, and that's good, because imagine the situation these exchanges and companies would be in if that was the case. They were exposed. Now, Stuart Alderati, general counsel at Ripple, he tweeted out here and retweeted Congressman Ro Khanna. He said, "Thank you, Ro Khanna, for your leadership to make Silicon Valley depositors whole. Some may decry VCs in tech, but this includes startups tackling hugely important problems within healthcare, climate change, AI, fintech, national security, and yes, sometimes even crypto." Now, we know Ripple, of course, they had some of their funds at Silicon Valley Bank, which their CEO, Brad Garlinghouse, addressed yesterday. We talked about it in yesterday's podcast. So we're seeing folks come out in support of these bailouts. Here, Eleanor Tourette highlighted something about Gary Gensler looking for more budget for the SEC. She said, in the SEC budget proposal, Gary Gensler emphasizes the agency's intention to ramp up crypto enforcement. Of course, more money means more hiring, and the SEC has already said it plans to add extra staff to its digital assets enforcement squad, which has nearly doubled in size in a year. So, guys, they're going to continue the enforcement. Just be prepared to see these things happen until Congress acts. Gary, like I mentioned with my source who told me about Operation Choke Point 2.0, Gary's not afraid because he's getting clear push from the top. Biden administration, Elizabeth Warren is his friend. So he's not worried. He's just going to keep doing what he's doing. There's no accountability here. The only hope is that House Democrats, the GOP folks, will bring him in, hold him accountable, and possibly pull some of his funding. I interviewed Representative Huizenga about this, and I know they have things planned, and it's a bit slower than I thought it would be, but I'm hoping, within the next 2 months, they can bring him in and hold him accountable. Finally, guys, I know I mentioned Jim Cramer, and inverse Cramer is what you should be doing. He tweeted out today, which is crazy. Many banks did invest poorly, but most of the big banks didn't. Don't confuse them. Will the banking system be stronger today? Yes. I tweeted out the kiss of death to the big banks. This right here is the kiss of death. So it's like when you see things like this and the history of Jim Cramer, it's like, man. Now, I don't treat this as gospel and like every single thing, but I think like 90 to 95% of what this guy says, you do the opposite and you'll do well. So when he makes calls like this, like sell all your crypto, sell your Bitcoin, the banks are okay, they're going to be stronger. That worries me, right? That more pain is ahead. Oh man, it's like, it's kind of weird. It's like a Twilight Zone type of thing here with Jim Cramer. He's become a meme, but there's even an inverse ETF for this man. It's hilarious. All right, guys, what do you think? Well, with Bitcoin pumping despite all these situations, and of course they're trying to blame all these banking issues on crypto, but we know better. And Barney Frank here once again just exposed them, went off script, and he's not like some random Joe Schmo. He's a congressman. Once again, he was part of the House Financial Services Committee and all that. So he has a history in government. So it was very interesting that he came out and said these things. Let me know what you think, and I'll talk to you all later.